Why do you want to change yourself? Seriously, what is wrong with you? Are you broken? Are you damaged? Are you less than someone else? No, you are not. You were created whole. You were given something nobody else was given. A specific way of seeing the world, a specific kind of depth, a specific energy that belongs only to you. But somewhere along the way, someone told you it was not enough, and you believed them, and you started chasing a version of yourself that looks like someone else. Someone successful, someone confident, someone that people admire, as if you have to become a different person to deserve a different life. You do not. What you actually need is not a new identity. It is to find the one you abandoned, the real one, the one buried under years of trying to be acceptable, trying to be enough, trying to be someone that the world would finally approve of. That person is still there, and this is about finding them. But first you need to understand something that most people never stop to ask. When did you decide you were not enough? Think about that, because you were not born thinking that. No child comes into this world believing they are too much or too little. No child wakes up in the morning ashamed of who they are. That shame was taught. That feeling of not being enough was installed. Slowly, quietly, over years. And the painful part is that most of it did not come from enemies. It came from the people closest to you. A parent who meant well but compared you to someone else. A teacher who graded your worth along with your answers. A group of people whose approval you needed more than you needed air, and every single time the message was the same. Who you are right now is not quite right. Who you are right now needs adjusting, needs improving, needs to be more like something else. And you were young, and you trusted them. So you listened, you started editing yourself. You noticed which parts of you made people uncomfortable, and you hid them. You noticed which version of you got the most approval, and you performed it over and over again. Until the performance became so familiar that you forgot it was a performance. You started calling it your personality. You started calling it growth. But it was not growth. It was survival. There is a difference between growing into yourself and shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never made for you. Real growth expands you. What most people call growth is actually compression, making yourself smaller, making yourself quieter, making yourself easier for other people to digest. And you did it so well, for so long, that now when someone tells you to just be yourself, you do not even know what that means anymore. Because which self? The one your parents wanted, the one your friends expect, the one you perform at work, the one you are when you are completely alone at 2 in the morning and the world is quiet. That last one. That is the one we are talking about. That is the real one. And here is what nobody tells you about identity. Your real identity was never lost. It was covered. Layer by layer. Every rejection added a layer. Every moment of being told you were too sensitive, too quiet, too much, not enough, too different, not normal enough. Every single one of those moments added something on top of who you actually are. And you adapted, because that is what humans do. We adapt to survive. But at some point, survival stops serving you. At some point, the mask you wore to get through becomes the prison that keeps you from living. And that is where most people are right now. Not broken, not damaged, just buried under decades of other people's opinions about who they should be. Neville Goddard understood this, not as a spiritual concept, as a psychological truth. He understood that the self you are living from right now is not necessarily the self you actually are. It is the self you were conditioned to believe you are. And there is a profound difference between those two things. One was chosen for you, the other was always yours. The one that was chosen for you carries weight. It carries memory. It carries the voice of every person who ever made you feel like you were not quite right. It carries the habit of shrinking. The habit of apologizing for existing. The habit of looking at other people and thinking, I need to be more like that. That voice is not yours. That voice was borrowed, and borrowed voices do not lead you to your real life. They lead you to someone else's. Think about the last time you tried to change yourself. Really think about it. What were you trying to become? More confident, more disciplined, more successful, more likable, more attractive. All of those things sound positive on the surface. But ask yourself something deeper. Where did that standard come from? Who decided that the version of confident you are chasing is the right kind of confident? Who decided that success looks the way you imagine it? Who showed you the picture in your mind of the person you are trying to become? Because I will tell you what happened. You looked around, you watched people who seemed to have what you wanted, and you decided to become like them, not because their way was right for you, but because their way was visible, because their results were loud enough for you to notice. And so you started trying to copy an identity that was never built for your specific soul, and then you wondered why it felt so exhausting, why self-improvement felt like running on a treadmill, moving constantly, but arriving nowhere, because you were not building yourself. You were building a costume, and costumes are exhausting to wear. They do not breathe, they do not fit right. No matter how much you adjust them, they never feel like yours, because they are not yours. They were never meant to be. Here is the truth that changes everything. You do not need to become anyone. You need to remember someone. That is a completely different process. Becoming requires you to add things, new habits, new behaviors, new scripts, new ways of walking into a room. Remembering requires you to remove things. Remove the fear of judgment. Remove the habit of performing. Remove the constant checking of whether you are acceptable enough. Remove the voice that says you are too much or not enough. And what is left when you remove all of that is you, the actual you. The version of you that existed before the world got its hands on you, before the comparisons, before the corrections, before the long education in how to be someone more palatable. That person has always been there, quietly, patiently, waiting underneath all the noise. And the reason you feel tired is not because life is hard. It is because you are spending enormous energy every single day maintaining a version of yourself that is not real. Think about what that costs. Every morning you wake up, and before you even face the world, you are already managing. Managing how you will come across, managing which parts of you to show and which to hide, managing the distance between who you actually are and who you think you need to be. That management is exhausting, and it is invisible. Nobody sees it, but you feel it. In the fatigue that has no obvious reason. In the emptiness that exists even when everything looks fine from the outside. In the quiet feeling that something is missing, even when you have things you once wanted. That feeling is not a flaw. That feeling is information. It is your real self, the one underneath all the layers, trying to tell you something. Telling you that this is not it, telling you that the life you are living is built on top of someone else's definition of you, and it is asking you to come back, not forward back. Back to something that was always true about you, something that did not need to be earned or developed or performed, something that simply is. The shift that actually changes your life is not the one where you become a new person. It is the one where you stop pretending to be the old one, the constructed one, the one built from other people's fear and other people's expectations and other people's measurements of what a person should be. That version of you was never real. And deep down, you have always known that. You have always felt the gap between the person you perform and the person you are when nobody is watching. That gap is not a problem to fix. That gap is a doorway, and walking through it is the only identity shift that actually lasts. Because you are not building something new, you are returning to something real, and real things do not require maintenance. Real things do not exhaust you. Real things feel like breathing, like finally breathing, after a very long time of holding your breath. There is a moment that happens for some people, a quiet moment, not dramatic, not loud, no sudden revelation, just a stillness, where you catch a glimpse of yourself without the performance, without the mask, without the constant management of how you appear. And in that stillness, something feels familiar, something feels true, like you recognized a face you had not seen in a very long time. Your own face, not the one you show the world, the real one. That moment is not the beginning of a transformation. That moment is a remembering. And Neville Goddard spoke about this in a way that most people misunderstood. Most people heard his teachings and thought he was saying, imagine the person you want to become and become them. But that was never the depth of what he meant. What he was pointing to was something far more profound. He was saying that the version of you that has everything you desire, the version that is confident, that is at peace, that moves through life with quiet certainty, that version is not a future version. That version is the real version. The one that exists underneath all the conditioning, underneath all the fear, underneath all the years of being told you were not quite right. He was not asking you to build a new self. He was asking you to uncover the one that was always there. And that changes everything about how you approach your own life. Because if you are trying to become something, you are starting from a place of lack. You are saying, I am not that yet. I need to get there. I need to earn it. I need to work until I am finally worthy of it. But if you are remembering something, you are starting from a place of truth. You are saying, this is already who I am. I am simply releasing everything that covered it. That is not a small difference. That is the entire difference. One path is exhausting. The other is liberating. One path keeps you chasing. The other brings you home. And the reason so many people stay stuck in the chasing is because the world taught them that worthiness is earned, that you have to deserve the life you want, that you have to prove yourself first. Work hard enough, improve enough, perform well enough, and then maybe you will be allowed to have peace. Maybe you will be allowed to feel confident. Maybe you will be allowed to finally be enough. But that is not how it works. That has never been how it works. Because you cannot earn something you already have. You can only stop hiding it. You can only stop apologizing for it. You can only stop measuring it against someone else's standard and calling it insufficient. The confidence you are chasing is not waiting for you at the end of a self-improvement plan. It is waiting for you underneath the belief that you are not already confident. The peace you are searching for is not a reward for getting your life together. It is what naturally exists when you stop fighting against who you actually are. Think about the moments in your life when you felt most alive. Not most successful, not most admired, most alive, most yourself, most real. In those moments you were not performing, you were not managing, you were not trying to be something. You were simply being, and it felt different. It felt lighter. It felt like something was not costing you anything. Those moments were not accidents. Those moments were glimpses of your real identity, the one that does not require effort to maintain, the one that does not drain you, the one that feels like coming home. And here is what is important to understand about those moments. They did not happen because your circumstances were perfect. They did not happen because everyone around you approved of you. They happened because for that brief window of time, you stopped trying to be different from what you are. That is the secret. That is the thing hidden in plain sight. The life you want is not on the other side of becoming someone else. It is on the other side of accepting who you already are. Fully, without conditions, without waiting for external permission, without needing the world to confirm it first. And this is where most people get stuck, because accepting who you are does not mean accepting limitation. It does not mean giving up on growth. It does not mean staying exactly where you are. It means something very specific. It means your starting point is wholeness, not brokenness. It means you move forward from a foundation of, I am already enough, not from a desperate place of, I need to fix myself before I deserve more. Because the energy you bring to your life creates the texture of your life. If you move through your days from a place of, I am lacking, you will keep creating experiences that confirm that. Not because you are being punished, but because the identity you are living from is always generating evidence for itself. A person who believes they are not enough will unconsciously make choices that prove it. Will unconsciously shrink in rooms where they should stand tall. Will unconsciously sabotage things that contradict the story, not because they want to, but because the deeper identity is always running in the background, always filtering reality through its own lens. always finding evidence for what it already believes. This is why surface-level change never works. You can change your habits, you can change your routine, you can change your environment. But if the identity underneath stays the same, everything eventually returns to the same pattern, because behavior follows identity. Not the other way around. You do not build confidence through action and then become a confident person. You recognize yourself as someone who is already whole, and the actions naturally follow from that recognition. This is the shift Neville was pointing to, not a new behavior, a new recognition, or more accurately, an old recognition, a return to the truth about who you are, before the world layered its opinions on top of you, before you started carrying other people's definitions like they were your own. Before you learned to look in the mirror and see a problem to be solved instead of a person to be known. You were not a problem. You were never a problem. You were a person with a specific and unrepeatable way of being in the world. And somewhere, along the way, that specificity started feeling like a flaw. Your sensitivity became too sensitive, your depth became too intense, your quietness became too withdrawn, your loudness became too much. Every specific thing about you was measured against a general standard, and of course it did not fit. It was never supposed to fit. Because you were not made to fit a general standard. You were made to be exactly what you are. And when you start living from that understanding, when that becomes your foundation instead of your aspiration, everything shifts, not overnight, not in a single dramatic moment, but gradually, the way light comes in the morning, slowly filling the room, not forcing, not rushing, just naturally illuminating what was always there. You start making decisions differently, not from fear of being rejected, but from the quiet knowledge of who you are. You stop needing everyone to understand you, because you understand yourself. You stop performing for approval, because your sense of self is no longer dependent on whether approval arrives. You stop chasing versions of yourself that were built from comparison, because you are too busy finally inhabiting the real one. And people notice, not because you changed dramatically, but because you stopped hiding. There is a quality that comes off a person who is genuinely themselves, not the performed version. Not the managed version, the real one. It is magnetic. Not because they are trying to be magnetic, but because authenticity has a frequency that performance never achieves. People are drawn to it without knowing why. They say things like, "There is something about you," and what that something is the absence of pretending. The absence of the mask. The presence of a person who has made peace with exactly what they are. That is not built. That is uncovered. That is what happens when you stop trying to change yourself and start finding who you already are. And that person, the real one, the one you have been covering up, the one you have been managing and editing and apologizing for, that person is more than enough. That person always was. You have spent so long trying to become someone that you forgot you already are someone, not a project, not a work in progress, not a rough draft waiting to be revised into something more acceptable. A person, complete, specific, real. And I know that might be difficult to receive, because you have been in the habit of seeing yourself as unfinished for so long. That wholeness feels unfamiliar. It feels almost suspicious. Like something must be wrong if you are not striving to be different. Like stillness means giving up. Like accepting yourself means settling. But that is the conditioning talking. That is the voice that was installed in you by a world that profits from your dissatisfaction. A world that needs you to believe you are not enough. Because people who believe they are not enough keep buying things. Keep chasing things, keep consuming content and courses and programs that promise to finally make them acceptable. And the industry of self-improvement is built on that wound, not on healing it, on keeping it open just enough that you keep coming back. But real change does not come from that wound. Real change comes from closing it, from saying, "I am not a problem to be solved, I am a person to be known, and I am going to start knowing myself." Not the version everyone else wanted, the real one. So what does that actually look like? What does it mean in practical terms to stop trying to change yourself and start finding who you already are? It starts with honesty, a very specific kind of honesty, not the harsh self-critical kind, not the kind where you list your flaws and shame yourself into improvement. The gentle kind, the kind where you sit quietly and ask yourself, what do I actually believe about who I am? Not what I tell people, not what I perform. What do I actually believe? Deep down, in the quiet, when nobody is watching and there is nothing to prove. What is the story I carry about myself? Because that story is running everything. That story is the operating system underneath every choice you make, every relationship you enter, every opportunity you step toward or away from. Every morning you wake up with energy or wake up already exhausted before the day begins. That story is the filter through which you experience your entire life, and most people have never examined it. They have just lived inside it, accepting it as reality, as fact, as simply the way things are. But it is not fact. It is a story, and stories can be recognized for what they are. Not fought, not forced into something different, simply recognized, seen clearly. Because when you see something clearly, when you really look at it without flinching, it begins to lose its power over you. The story that says you are not enough only survives in the dark, in the unexamined corners of your inner life. The moment you bring it into the light, the moment you look at it directly and say, where did this come from? Who told me this? Is this actually true? Something shifts, not loudly, but deeply. You start to see the difference between what is real about you and what was simply repeated to you until you believed it. And that difference is everything, because what is real about you has always been there. Quiet, patient, consistent. It does not change based on who is in the room. It does not disappear when someone criticizes you. It does not shrink when the world gets loud. It just waits. It has always just waited for you to come back to it. Neville Goddard spoke about the power of assumption, and most people understood that as assume the best about your future. But there is a deeper layer. Assume the truth about yourself right now. Not the conditioned truth, not the borrowed truth, the real one. Assume that you are already whole. Assume that you are already the person you have been trying to become. Not as a lie you tell yourself, not as a positive affirmation you repeat until you believe it, but as a recognition of what was always true. The wholeness was always there. The confidence was always there. The depth, the value, the specific unrepeatable quality of who you are. It was always there. You just spent years looking away from it, looking at other people instead, measuring yourself against them, finding yourself lacking, and then working desperately to close a gap that was never real. The gap was never real. There is no gap between who you are and who you are supposed to be. There is only the distance between who you actually are and who you have been pretending to be, and that distance is not closed by becoming more. It is closed by performing less, by dropping the mask. Not all at once. You do not have to throw everything off in a single dramatic moment. Gently, the way you take off something heavy that you have been carrying for so long, you forgot it was not a part of you. You set it down, slowly, and you feel the difference in your body, the lightness, the relief, the strange feeling of being exactly where you are supposed to be without having gone anywhere at all. That is the identity shift, not a destination you arrive at, a recognition you return to, again and again, because this is not a one-time event. The world will continue to ask you to be different. People will continue to have opinions about who you should be. Situations will continue to pressure you into performing the familiar old version, and every time that happens, you will have a choice. To go back to the mask, or to return to yourself. And every time you choose yourself, every time you choose the real version over the performed version, the real version gets stronger, not louder, stronger, more rooted, more certain, more present in your daily life. Until one day you realize that the mask has been sitting in the corner for a long time and you have not needed it. and you look back at all the years you spent trying to be someone else. And you feel something that is not quite sadness, and not quite relief. Something in between. A compassion for yourself. For the person who was doing the best they could with what they believed was true. For the version of you that genuinely thought they were not enough, and believed that trying harder to be someone different was the answer. That version of you was not wrong. They were just working from incomplete information. They did not know that the thing they were searching for was not ahead of them. It was underneath them. Underneath all the trying, underneath all the performing, underneath all the years of looking outward for a validation that could only ever come from within. And now you know, not as information, as something felt, something recognized. The real shift does not happen in your behavior first. It happens in how you see yourself. It happens in the quiet moment when you stop looking at yourself as a problem and start looking at yourself as a person worth knowing. Worth understanding. Worth returning to. That moment is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of the real one, the one where you stop running from yourself and start living as yourself. Fully, without apology, without permission, without waiting for the world to confirm that you are allowed to be exactly what you are. You were always allowed. You were always enough. You were always the person you were looking for. You just had to stop long enough to recognize them. And now you have. Not because something was added to you today, because something was finally seen. The you that was always there, underneath everything, quiet, patient, real, waiting for you to come home. You are home now.